Texas.
And in our roundtable, a preview of the George Stephanopoulos book, All Too Human.
The George Stephanopoulos book, the George W. Bush candidacy, and the Linda Tripp interview this Sunday morning. Good morning. Well, it's been the week of Monica. Monica the interview, Monica the book. This coming week it's Monica the tour. And we'll be talking about that, Sam, and see if this ever ends.
Well, Cokie, we're going to be talking to one of the key players in all of this drama, Linda Tripp. Ms. Tripp, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you this morning, and with us as always to join in the questioning, George Will. Now, Ms. Tripp, Monica Lewinsky says she hates you. The president's defenders call you the great betrayer. Andrew Morton, who wrote that book, from Monica's recollections today, said, well, Monica thinks she's the devil incarnate. How do you see yourself?
It's not how I see myself, Sam. It's Monica, the world according to Monica at this point. This is Monica's self-justification of events that she was complicit in bringing about. I see it as revisionist history.
All right, you watched Monica Lewinsky's interview with Barbara Walters, I take it, and you know something about the book that was written. Is she, in an overall sense, telling the truth?
I see it in terms of the F word without a vulgarity attached to the F word. I see it as fiction. I see it as fable, fantasy, farce, and fairy tale. I see almost no bearing on reality.
Well, in the book and in her interview with Barbara Walters, she paints this as sort of a dalliance between a man and a woman. When she was talking to you, when she was calling you so much, when she was pouring out her heart to you, is that the way she was depicted it?
What I got from the book, and I must confess, I read most of it, I have not had a chance to complete the book. What I got was a romanticizing of a tawdry, abusive relationship. I believe that Monica, in her heart of hearts, knows better, but I believe that she believes this form of recollection of the relationship serves her best.
Well, let's talk about a couple of the specifics of those recollections. She says that she's told Time magazine that she sees herself as a pawn in the vast right-wing conspiracy that you were a member of. And Charles Ruff, the president's lawyer, when speaking to the Senate, talked about that famous day at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel and your role there. Let's listen to Mr. Ruff for a second.
On the 16th, Ms. Tripp invited Ms. Lewinsky to have lunch with her in the Pentagon City Mall, and there she was greeted by a corps of FBI agents and independent counsel lawyers and taken to a whole hotel room where she spent the next several hours. Ms. Tripp was in the room next door for much of that time. When she left that evening, she went home to meet with the Jones lawyers, with whom we know she has been in contact for many months, in order to brief them about her knowledge of the relationship between Ms. Lewinsky and the president, so that they in turn could question the president the next morning.
There you are. That is the conspiracy, and according to Monica Lewinsky, according to Charles Ruff, according to Bill Clinton.
And it resonates, and it's completely, perfectly wrong.
Tell us what's wrong.
Well, let's back up just a bit. The reason that Monica and I were meeting during that week was for Monica to be able to ultimately convince me to file a false affidavit in the, at that time, Kathleen Willey affair, to circumvent Paula Jones' civil rights and to complicitly act as a contributing member to what I perceived to be a conspiracy orchestrated by the president.
So the so-called talking points that she presented.
Well, that was a part of it, certainly, which all were, let me remind you, about Kathleen Willey, with a very little P.S. about Monica Lewinsky. At that time, no one was aware of any information I may have had about Monica.
So this was all a question of you filing an affidavit in the Paula Jones lawsuit about Kathleen Willey and Monica Lewinsky trying to convince you to
right, and who benefited from that? It was certainly not in Monica Lewinsky's best interest. It was in the interest of the president that I do so, to undermine any credibility Kathleen Willey might have had. And so those meetings were not so much to draw Monica into this web, but I had agreed to meet with Monica to discuss this. At this point, I was very fearful. This was December, things were coming to a head. I was appeasing Monica, all the same time cooperating with the independent counsel. What I think is important to address is these scurrilous allegations that the independent counsel, in the form of prosecutors and FBI agents, treated Monica in a horrible way. That is so completely false.
You were there?
I was there. I was there until about 4 o'clock, when I made it clear to the FBI agents that I had to leave. I was under subpoena, and I had to be elsewhere to give, in lieu of a deposition, an oral interview. I don't believe I mentioned for whom it was, however, for the Paula Jones lawyers.
And how did they treat her?
I thought she was treated, I mean, it was an unfortunate situation. I don't believe anyone wanted to be there. But the reality was, what I read in the book and explanations that I've seen depicting the events of that day are completely removed from reality. At all times they acted professional. There was no G-men sort of attitude, handcuffs, weapons, this kind of thing. Never. They treated her with the utmost professionalism given the circumstances.
What about the question of calling her lawyer and telling her?
Completely untrue. She was told from the beginning. In fact, my biggest shock, as I told them prior to this, Monica is far too clever for this. She will walk away from you. She will say, I don't have to talk to you. I don't have my attorney with me. I'm out of here. But she didn't do that. I was completely stymied that she didn't. They were gracious. They were polite at all times. If I had not been there and I just read the depiction in Andrew Morton's book, I would be horrified.
So why don't you think Kenneth Starr will let her talk about it? Why has he put a gag order on that part of the whole history?
You know, I don't know. He has nothing to hide. The truth would not harm Judge Starr in any way.
Ms. Tripp, we've read the transcripts of the conversations you had with Monica Lewinsky that were documented. Ballpark estimate, what percentage of your conversations with Ms. Lewinsky were not documented?
Easily 98%.
Now, about that, she says something in her book on page 171 that really is quite an attack on you. She says, whether by accident or design, Tripp either did not record or held back the recordings of numerous significant conversations which would have seriously diluted Starr's case for including Monica Lewinsky in his investigations. They would have shown that Vernon Jordan's involvement with Monica had been at her own suggestion. Is that true?
To the extent, let me clarify one point before I go to the other. To the extent that I thought that Vernon Jordan could be helpful in placing Monica in New York, that is very true. It's important to note that anything I said to Monica under any circumstances would always have been what I would have said to her had there not been any documentation going on.
But what she is really saying in this passage is that Vernon Jordan is being hurt by the fact that the other 90% have not been documented. What, if they had been documented, what would it show about Vernon Jordan's involvement?
I think had they been documented, Vernon Jordan would be facing legal consequences.
For what?
For obstruction of justice.
Where? How?
I believe that had I been documenting a very crucial time in this sequence of events, there would be no doubt in any of your minds, certainly not in the minds of the public, that there was complicity in ensuring that Monica Lewinsky received a job for her silence and went away peaceably and happily to ensure that this did not surface, that she did not make the relationship public.
Did Monica Lewinsky indicate to you that Mr. Jordan had said something to her when she was going to deal with her lawyer over the affidavit that would not reflect well on Vernon Jordan?
Absolutely.
What was it?
Remember that I was receiving blow-by-blow details at this point. The subterfuge or the misinformation campaign from Monica didn't start until our post-December 22nd conversation, where she realized once and for all, Linda Tripp is not going to lie about me or anything else. And then the disinformation campaign, as I term it, began. Prior to that, she was extremely candid with me, morning, noon, and night. And in this regard, she told me that she was instructed by both the President and Vernon Jordan that she had no choice but to use the, quote, story, the cover story.
When did Vernon Jordan tell her that?
Monica told me that he told her that on the way to the Frank Carter interview, and it's important to remember that it was...
Frank Carter was her lawyer at the time.
Well, it was her lawyer assigned to her by Vernon Jordan.
George, let me pick up on that point, because let's see what the president had to say. That famous affidavit that Monica Lewinsky gave, in which she denied under oath that there was any sexual relationship with the president, which now we all know was false. Here is what President Clinton said when he was questioned before the grand jury about that affidavit.
Did you talk to Ms. Lewinsky about what she meant to write in her affidavit?
I didn't talk to her about her definition. I did not know what was in this affidavit before it was filled out specifically. I did not know what words were used specifically before it was filled out, or what meaning she gave to them.
The president says he didn't talk to her about the affidavit, and he didn't know what was in the affidavit specifically. What did Monica Lewinsky tell you?
Completely, as you can well imagine, completely 180 degrees from what the president has alleged under oath.
Can you either remember her words exactly or paraphrase exactly what she told you?
Oh, I can certainly paraphrase. His words to her were that in order to avoid testimony in any way under oath, that she was to file an affidavit in which she emphatically denied a sexual involvement with the president. And further, that this was done routinely, that many women so associated with the president had filed these very affidavits. Remember, the talking points were all about Linda Tripp writing just this very type of affidavit.
The president has said that he and Monica Lewinsky discussed a cover story just in general, to avoid embarrassment, to avoid the affair coming out for his wife and people like that. But has denied, of course, that he tied it to her testimony in any form under oath. You're telling us that she told you that the president had told her she was to use this cover story in the affidavit under oath?
Absolutely. This is something to which I testified in the grand jury. The affidavit became critical. There came a point in time when I suggested to Monica that it was not in her best interest to sign this affidavit until she had secured a job in Washington, which had been her sort of axe being held over the president all along.
Well, the president's statement we just saw did, that word specifically he put in twice, so that he said he didn't know what was in the affidavit, what she was going to say specifically. So he doesn't quite deny, using his words precisely, that he knew what was in the affidavit.
But Monica Lewinsky did, I think, tell you about the conversation she had with Mr. Jordan, driving with Mr. Jordan to her lawyer.
Oh, yes.
What was that?
It was all about how this came about quite swiftly. And he found her a lawyer and then escorted her to that very lawyer in his sedan. And in that ride over, Monica told me that he said that he answered, "What choice do you have?" And again, I testified to this. She said, "The story." He said, "Yes." She said, "Well, what if," and these were questions I might add she also posed to the President of the United States. This wasn't just posed to Vernon Jordan. And the questions were, well, what if someone saw us? It wasn't you. What if someone found a note from me? You didn't write it. What if they, God forbid, have a picture or a videotape? It wasn't you.
Well, did she have reason to believe that those things existed? Was there a videotape?
We don't know. To this day, I don't think anyone knows. I think the reality is that this was a fear Monica had, that she could be set up for perjury if, in fact, proof positive existed.
Well, the proof positive that did exist, of course, turned out to be the infamous blue dress. And there's been a great deal of controversy about your role in convincing her to save that dress. And as you know, she was asked about that in her interview with Barbara Walters this past week. Let's take a look at what her answer was to that question.
If there was a parade and I said to you, Ms. Walters, come stand here for the best view of this parade, and I planned actually secretly to push a piano out of the window to fall on your head, and then at the last minute I pulled you out of the way so that the piano didn't hit you, and then said, I saved your life. It's ridiculous. It's ludicrous. This dress is one of the most humiliating things that has happened to me.
She's, of course, responding to your point that you saved her from being just torn apart by the White House machine by the fact that she had evidence. And that's her response.
something far greater than a piano was about to befall Monica's head. Without that dress, where would she be today? Would she be en route to London and a extensive book tour being heralded by pipers at Harrods, or would she be branded the stalker and worse? This was all coming. I feel that this blue dress served as Monica's insurance policy, much as my documentation served as my insurance policy.
And again, that whole question is, your motives have been very much called into question there. The vast right-wing conspiracy, your connections with Lucianne Goldberg, the questions of whether it was a book, trying to bring down the president, all of those things. Mm-hmm. All that has been asserted.
Where's the book, Cokie? Where is the book? Had there been a book, that's where I would have been on January 12th, I promise you. Yes, there had been a book in '96. I was tired, completely weary of being cognizant of things that had gone on in this White House and being somewhat complicit in the cover-up. This was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I was being solicited to commit a crime that was no option for me. It would never have been.
Before leaving the subject of the dress, at the point when you suggested that she keep the undry cleaned dress, how long had she already kept it undry cleaned?
Oh, Mr. Will, she had had it for months. In fact, I knew about its existence. I had just not seen it.
What was her attitude when she
Pride.
displayed it to you? Pride.
Pride.
Was it an ambiguous stain?
No.
Say some more.
Well, you did see it eventually.
I did. Oh, yes, of course I saw it. It's interesting that in the portion of the book that I did read, it references a tiny stain. Well, by the time the independent counsel received that to provide it to its FBI lab, quite possibly that's all that remained on the dress. It certainly was not a guacamole stain or a blue cheese stain, as I've read. It was a splatter effect. And not to be too tawdry or to drown in the weeds, but this was a badge of honor for Monica. It validated the relationship.
You found out about the dress because she told you, is that correct?
Of course.
I mean, you didn't somehow try to make the connect between her version, which is that you really were driving all of this, and your version, which is that you didn't know about it unless she told you and showed it to you.
Well, of course she showed it to me. Remember that one of the allegations seems to be that I encouraged that Monica have this affair.
But she does say that you know,
right.
You're just the kind of girl the president would like, that you kept repeating to her.
And that's completely untrue. First of all, anyone who knows me knows that I find this atrocious, horrifying, unconscionable. However, I had only known Monica peripherally during the months leading up to the point where she finally told me. During that time, she made it very apparent to me that she was a groupie. She had a huge crush on the president. My comments to her over time were things like, it's a good thing he didn't know, he most certainly would have taken you up on it. I didn't know that she had been banished from the White House at that time. I was told it was a reorganization. The notion that I went up to her and said in November or whenever it was, the election's over, now you can go back and have the affair, is ludicrous. I didn't know that there was any issue about returning to the White House.
Speaking of, I don't know what I'm speaking of, but I want you to explain it to us if you can. There's a snippet of conversation between you and Monica Lewinsky in which the name Juanita comes up. Let's just hear this for a moment and see what you can tell us about it.
Oh, no, they haven't leaked any of the others. They didn't leak any of them. This one's huge. It'll leak. It'll be denial, we assume, correct? Well, from that other sheet of everything he said, those are definitely denial. Yeah. I wonder how he'll explain that 128-minute call to 158. 158 to Juanita. Say it wasn't him, I guess. Well, I mean, the truth is it could have been a one that I really don't remember.
Now, a woman named Juanita Broderick has made the claim publicly that the president raped her in the 70s. Do you know whether that Juanita is this Juanita?
I was completely unaware of Juanita Broderick's allegations at that point in time, and no, this was not Juanita Broderick.
Then which Juanita was it?
I think at this point in time, Sam, I'd rather just say that it was not Juanita Broderick.
Well, we have to just finish that because that's too tantalizing. We can't put words in your mouth. But the conversation was, boy, how is he going to explain this? Clearly, the two of you think this is a big deal, and there's a woman named Juanita. Is this a woman who has yet to surface in this case?
In this case? Well, let me just say that in our opinion, this was a woman whose relationship with the president would have again gone to pattern of behavior, which was precisely what the Paula Jones attorneys were searching for. And remember, the country has forgotten in the vast array of events over the past year that this was all about one woman bringing, and for whatever you think of her veracity or the legitimacy of her lawsuit, a successful lawsuit in terms of discovery, pattern of behavior against the president. This was a woman with whom we thought the president might have difficulty.
So you're quite plain, I'm going to pass it on, but
You
you're
mean
quite
the
plainly
Juanita woman
saying,
is a woman you thought the
Correct.
president might?
you're quite plainly saying that there is a woman named Juanita out there. If her story became public, you believe the president would have a problem with it.
Let me just say that our use of the name Juanita was irresponsible. It's a woman who has not surfaced in this case, and by case I mean Paula Jones' case, to date.
But the pattern to which you're referring to is harassment followed by job offers?
No, not necessarily. The pattern is a behavior with other women, differing behavior with denial.
You said you have not written a book. I don't know whether you intend to write a book or not, but if you did, what specific hard news fact would the reviewers focus on?
You know, it's interesting. If the books continue to be fiction, fable, farce, fantasy, as Monica Lewinsky's clearly is, then I feel it is incumbent upon me to at least allow the American people to see the truth as I know it to be.
What's the lead paragraph of the review in your book?
Monica Lewinsky would be the end chapter. It was this much in what I observed during my tenure.
Well, tell us a bit.
It would be about everything else. It would be about what got me to the point where Monica Lewinsky was just the straw that broke the camel's back.
What's the biggest straw before that?
I would talk about the Rose Law Firm billing records. I would talk about what I know to be true about Mrs. Clinton's involvement, absolutely hands-on involvement in the Travelgate firing of the gentleman who worked there.
Do you have things to say that are not public already about that?
You know, I don't know what's public or not. I've testified in various procedures and have been truthful under oath about these very things. Mrs. Clinton testified under oath on 3 separate occasions that I'm aware of, that there was no activity, overt or in any other way, on her part with the firing of the travel office.
No.
So
Is that not true?
That's not true.
So you think that the sort of thing that, if she ran for the Senate, you think that this would be a problem for her?
Oh, I think many things would be a problem once they surface. Mrs. Clinton, in my opinion, not only in terms of her seeing her role as co-president, and I don't say that in a way to fault her, was complicit in the time that I was there in virtually every scandal.
That does then raise this question again about your motive, because if you saw them as people who were not good people, was it you felt in the interest of the country to get rid of them?
I don't ever want to downplay, Koki, my outrage. I will never shy away from the fact that I didn't put blinders on. I didn't cover my ears and say, I don't want to hear this. I felt it was important many years ago for the public to be aware of what I was seeing firsthand. But the notion that I set anyone up to come to that end is not true. Remember that I had talked to Monica Lewinsky for a year in depth and never once took a step to document that. It was only when I was being threatened and asked to commit a crime that I took what I considered to be proactive steps to arm myself with records.
You've gone back to the Pentagon now. You've been working at home. How are you being treated?
You know, I'm not back at the Pentagon. I wish I were. I wish I had been sent back to my position as director of an extremely visible program under the Secretary of Defense. I've been assigned to an agency whose name escapes me at the moment. I've only been there one day. I can tell you that my series, Public Affairs, isn't one that they accommodate there.
So this is not the Pentagon building itself,
No,
but it's not home.
It's not home, and I'm happy to be back at work. I just sincerely hope that there's a mission for me that's commensurate with my experience and my pay grade.
Jim Moran, the congressman from our local area in Virginia, a Democrat, had some very bitter words about you in the House of Representatives in committee the other day, questioning the fact that you had this big paying job and really suggesting to Secretary Cohen, I suppose, that you'd be removed.
I didn't see his remarks, I read them. I can tell you this, if Mr. Moran feels that he's qualified to speak about my 19-year career, then I'm frankly surprised that he hasn't reviewed my personnel record. I have a 19-year distinguished career. I have awards and the most outstanding performance appraisals consistently during that 19-year. And frankly, the Pentagon has shown no qualms about releasing that very information. I'm surprised they haven't to him.
Monica Lewinsky has said that 14 months ago she was near suicidal despair. She seems to have gotten over that. You saw the interview with Barbara Walters. How would you characterize, you know her, how would you characterize her mood at the moment?
Euphoric.
Well, that's the last word. Of course, you would have it. Thank you very much, Linda Tripp, for being with us.